Okay, it's 7 o'clock. Welcome to our board meeting. 1.1, call the meeting to order. 1.2, approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, 2.1, approval of consent agenda.
Consent agenda is pretty typical. We just had the one board meeting during the last month's regular meeting. We do have some surplus items. One of them is the scoreboard, our latest big scoreboard. We tried like everything to find a school system with orange colors that thought they could use it, and we just have not been able to do that. So we will put it out there for somebody to put in their backyard, I guess.
I did have someone call me today about that and express that it's a little difficult to see some of the things on the digital scoreboard. It's hard to read the yards and the number of timeouts and all that.
Yeah.
Just because it's just different when, well, I'm sure you've seen it, and the older I get, the more I notice it too, when things are just on a screen versus lit up as individual bulbs on a blackboard. It's harder to see.
If we could use black line trim on the
I've already
numbers.
talked to Chris Kern about it. He's looking at a fix because as you adjust size of that, then you're taking size away from the video portion or the
Right.
portion or everything else. So he's looking at some different options as far as color or outline or something like that. Also, we do have, I mean, down in distance, you can see on the chain gang, but I know that's a little bit different. A lot of people look up there and they go, that's fuzzy, but it's being looked at, I'll say that.
A couple other things there. We do have a rental price for the stadium mezzanine room. Likened it to renting commons areas, cafeteria, pretty similar. And then we also had some site council memberships that were not in last month. So that's about the extent of it. Any questions on any of those things?
Need a motion to approve it then?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we didn't pull anything out, so 4.1 FFA donation.
Do have a donation from Zotis. It's a company that provides some vet supplies, that kind of thing, to the FFA in the amount of $550.50. We need that approved because it's over 500.
I'd move we approve the donation of $550.50 from Zotis.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the FFA donation. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
4.2, out-of-state travel.
All righty. Our band is making plans to go to, there's several things here. FFA National Convention, Indianapolis, Indiana. FBLA National Fall Leadership Conference in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The band is going to Winter Park. That is a ski music festival. They got late notice this afternoon that the time would have to change just briefly. So if you had looked earlier, I think we originally had that where it would be maybe the full first week in April, and we're adjusting that to March 30th through April 3rd. And again, that's Winter Park, Colorado, and then the NSDA National Tournament in Louisville, Kentucky in June. And those are all, because they're out of state, that needs to be board approved. Expenses would be limited at this point to the board if we provide, I call it a four-wheel vehicle, like a van or something like that, then that's the expense of it is providing the van. Other expenses are taken care of by the clubs. I missed anything on that, Ben, or did I take care of it?
I'd make a motion to approve the out-of-state trip request.
Second.
Been moved and seconded by somebody over there. We'll call it Jennifer. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, 5.1, Mr. Roth. You're up.
That was fast.
Keep it short, preacher.
I can do that. You do all have paper in your possession. I'm going to just kind of talk about a few things. I came here, I think, 4 years ago. And I looked at my notes, and times, honestly, it's been kind of a blur. So I don't remember how many of you guys were even here for that. I just know I was. So we're going to talk a little bit about virtual and then kind of emphasize the credit recovery program so we kind of understand the differences between the two. The virtual school has been around since 2009, 2010. So we are on year 12-ish. Dr. Smith's been here for, I think, all but 2 of them. So one of the early guys here. What we found is that kids who do really, really well in this program are either really intrinsically motivated, they want to do well, or they're extrinsically motivated. They need a job, they have some personal issues, have some family issues, various reasons bring them to me. Those kids tend to do incredibly well. Dr. Smith and I and the counselors will meet with every potential student and kind of talk about what's best for the student, and we want to make sure we put them in a program where they're going to succeed. We don't want to put them in a situation that's going to make it worse, have them fall further behind. And to ensure that every kid who comes to us, they spend 2 weeks on probation period. So in that 2 weeks' time, if they meet the expectations that we put forth for them, we allow them to stay. If they get a day or two into it and say, "Matt, this is not for me, I do not like it," we very simply put them right back into the high school. So it's kind of a catch safety net for both the school system and for the students so they don't get themselves into a tough spot. To be with me, they have to be enrolled in 4 classes to be considered full-time. And then we highly encourage, and most kids pretty easily will go to the high school for a class or 2. That helps them stay connected to the adults, to other classmates. And I don't know if there's been very many interviews where I haven't very honestly told kids and parents that I don't believe the computer system replaces the human element of teaching. You can't replace that, but we do have kids in our system who just thrive better when it's the computer and just 1 or 2 classes to worry about and 1 or 2 adults in their lives they have to worry about. So we've met that. The evolution over time is I think we've gotten a little bit more liberal with who we've taken because we do realize that sometimes there's a second or third or fourth opportunity for kids and virtual becomes that opportunity for them. And over time, we've graduated approximately 80 students in 12 years. So we've had a number of kids come through the system. Last year was probably it was the high water mark. We had at one point another 32 different kids come to the program. Obviously, COVID was a big reason for that. We had about 15 middle school kids at one point were part of it as well. So I will say that we were much better equipped than a lot of schools, districts to take on the COVID issues because we had a system that was state approved. The DCLA program is another unique beast, and a little bit of history on that. It was, by the people I talked to, my local historian, we think 1998 was the first year. And the letters stand for Dickinson County Learning Exchange, and all four of the county schools would give kids to this building. It's now ours. In 2011, it moved to the Old Ed Center. And it's basically ran by a couple of awesome ladies who do tremendous work, Miss Wyoming Snyder and Mrs. Dawn Holloway. They have huge hearts, and they know how to reach a lot of these kids. And so it's been very, very successful. We are actually working on a document that we had this epiphany moment last Friday that we'd like to know where as many of our kids have ended up. And just a quick little talk with our staff. We have some folks in the military. We have a number of hairstylists. We have a few in the nursing field. We have a number in the service industries. And so these kids are leaving us and they're successful. It's not the same. It's not a normal classroom. They come into a building and they check in and they sit in a cubby and they work on their iPad and they get help from the teachers. And then we highly encourage them, in fact, almost force them to go to the high school for a class because none of us are wired to sit in front of an iPad for 7 hours a day. We cannot do it. The staff needs a break from them as well. So they all get to the high school for at least a class and lunch, and they get to hang out with their friends. And so that's been very beneficial. And in fact, if there was one thing that's probably the greatest thing about moving into town is that there was a time where this clientele, for a lack of a better term, it was pretty rough. Having them back in town where they can walk a block to the high school and engage with the community, the teachers, because we have some amazing kids at DCLA this year. They are awesome. They just didn't do school. And the kids who come to us are in a credit crunch. They're in desperation. So our counseling staff, Dr. Smith, they make a list. We all decide who's a good fit, who can succeed, and then we offer them an opportunity to be one of our 16. So because there's only 16, there are some kids that we have to move back to the high school. If you can't utilize a seat, if you can't make progress, there's somebody always waiting in the wings who wants that chair. So we have to have a fairly short leash with some of these kids so we can get as many kids through the system as we can. The thing I love about DCLE is it's very much a family environment. Kids come in and we have time to talk and find out how life is. And they stock an incredibly well-stocked fridge and snacks, and they charge them, but all that money that gets returned to the kids in form of pizza parties or something else. It's kind of a reward. So they're paying for their own parties and they don't even know it. So that's kind of cool. So you do have a few pictures and hopefully you can kind of tell what they are, but the ladies do a nice job of every year there's a theme. And the couple of years I took pictures of, one year we had a whole bunch of skateboarders, and so there was pictures of skateboards and their names on it. So it's easy for me to know how many kids graduate from DCLA because I just walk along the wall and I can see every kid's name and what year it was. So we've got this awesome wall of fame that kind of encircles or encompasses the room. The program itself is the DCLA program. We use the exact same as virtual. It's Edgenuity. There's just a lot more. If you go to the last page there, in terms of the big differences, AVS is very much independent. The kids have to be proactive. They have to ask for help from the teachers that we have hired at the high school. The ones at DCLA are very much structured. They operate on the bell schedule. When that bell rings, they leave and they go to high school, or they nestle under their cubby and they get to work. It's much more of a school atmosphere. AVS, they've got to advocate for themselves. DCLA, there's plenty of online support or on-site support. And virtual, we have an open enrollment. If you apply and you can make a great sales pitch to us that you're going to be successful, we'll accept you. At DCLA, it's kind of a credit crunch and who's most at need. One quick comment, if I go back a page. The program itself, every class is about 30 to 35 hours in length. So if you look at a traditional classroom at the high school, it's about 60 hours. And so what we've done is every class is going to have to take time for attendance, or they have group project time, or they just have work time, or they might have a few minutes at the end of the hour where they're not doing anything. Well, all that stuff just kind of disappears. And so the kids have the core. This is what the state feels you need to have, and it's just the basics. And so there's not a lot of thrill to it. It's lectures and quizzes and a few projects and assignments, and then they test, and then they do the cycle all over again. So the kids who are successful, they're wired in a way that this works for them. It probably wouldn't work for a lot of us because it's not our generation, but it's worked quite well for a number of these kids. So in terms of the future, I know that we have kind of started some conversations about what the program might look like as it expands. Do we make it more of a statewide program? Obviously, resources, what's the vision, personnel, the feasibility of the program like that. I know Mr. Brown's set up a few meetings on some Zooms that we've sat in on and listened to some sales pitches. There's been some admin meetings where the elementary staff administrators have talked about where they want to go as well. So in terms of the vision down the road, I don't have a real complete answer for you, but I do know it's in the talks, and Mr. Brown wants to build on that at all. He's obviously more than welcome to build on that. But if you guys have questions, I'd be more than happy to answer any that you may have.
I guess maybe for our admin team, I know we had a little bit of a spike last year with, kids wanting to do virtual or thinking about that. Is that something you see as a trend that's going to continue? Do you think it's leveled off? Is it going down? What's your guys' thought as we move forward? Because, from the outside looking in, it looks like this is the program. It's been the program. And, I think if COVID taught us anything, that the world has kind of changed. So.
I would just speak. I only know of one family that chose to go virtual this year because of everything going on. If I look back over the past year, we were able to do some things differently in Eisenhower than maybe at some of the other buildings, just based on some things going on with staff. But I would say, just after talking with the other elementary principals, that doing it the way we did last year probably isn't going to work long-term, just because of our teachers have something to do already with the kids that are there. And if we were to do something virtual, we would need to really look at developing that program separate from what we have in-house.
Well, I guess, yeah, is there a need there?
At the moment, I don't necessarily see it, because like I said, I only know of one family that chose not to come this year to do virtual, or that asked about anything.
I'm in the same boat, but I maybe have a different thought about it. I think that everything we're reading right now and everything we're looking at is pointing to the need for a virtual program. I think you're right. That's where I agree with Ethan. We haven't seen that here yet. We talked about that last year, the power of yet. I don't think we've seen it yet, but I think as long as there are YouTube stars and as long as there are younger and younger people that are finding different ways to make money and be really proactive in their whatever they do in their life, I think we're going to have a need for that eventually. I think especially as we start to see that greater shift moving away from, there was a long period of time, I think we've all talked about that we really talked about secondary education and we talked about what you're doing next. But I think that as we get better at our jobs and at what we do, I think there will be a time in the next 5 to 10 years when we're going to need to be prepared for that next step, because we're going to have people that are going to choose different careers that they're going to need to be able to work online and do some things online, even elementary. I think we have to be very careful about how we move forward. I think that there are people that jumped that gate and did good, and there are some people that did really great at it. But I think for our community and for our needs, I think it will look different for us. I don't think we will look like Manhattan, or we maybe won't look like Lawrence's program. But I think for our kiddos, I think that will definitely need to be an option for us if we're looking at five years down the road. I think we're going to need to look at that option, because I think you're right. I think COVID taught us that we need to be prepared, and I think that's something we need to be prepared for. So
We currently have 24 high school kids enrolled in the virtual program. And we had one middle school student who, after 5 or 6 weeks in conversations with mom and dad, we put him back at the middle school. He wasn't ready.
Yeah, and it wasn't a health concern, it was a behavioral concern. And so it was better for him to be in person.
I think it would be good just to keep talking about it and discussing it in case it happens again. We can just flip a switch and boom, we're back, and take some of the stress off of the teachers and you guys, so that way they're not going, oh my God, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta do this. And they'll already know the plan that's in place, if we should ever have to go back to.
I would think if there was one thing that I think if we could all go back and do it differently, we probably would have opened up virtual school first semester last year instead of waiting until second semester.
Yep.
Because of the 15, 16, we had a number of kids who were far more successful virtually than they were trying to do the remote.
The thing that I think that I see is if there's a couple students here in the, I'm specifically talking elementary, middle school level, because that's what we don't have. Let's say that there's some students in our district that have that need, and then there's Solomon and Bennington and Clay Center and Chapman, and can we pull from those areas? And I mean, I understand that's really building your program, but
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because that was what I was going to say is I think whatever the future holds, we are the largest city in Dickinson County. And so we are going to potentially in our county lose families to other counties because they have virtual programs that are more robust. And so I almost think it behooves us to do a full-fledged program here as much as we can, so that we become sort of that county seat provider. The challenge is, as Ethan said, I don't think we can do it with the staff we currently have. It's going to be a matter of, actually, it's not that I don't think, I know we can't do it with the staff we currently have, because it's going to. I think it's going to
take months of, figuring out if if it's a need in multiple communities around us, and if we're gonna be proactive about it, is there opportunity for us? Because the thing you'd hate to do is add staff and build a program and have it be for one student.
Right.
You know, which takes, again, takes a lot of time and dedication and, investigation to find out how that's gonna work and if it's gonna work, so.
I get about 1 or 2 phone calls a year from someone outside of the district asking if they can participate in our virtuals, and I have to send them away because biggest hindrance to that within the current system is that they have to go do their testing with Mr. Roth in his office. And if you are, even as close as Chapman or Solomon, that becomes problematic if you don't have transportation. And so if they live in Abilene or if they live in our district, that's one of the key things they have to do right now. So if we were to change that, we'd have to alter the way we do our testing or the way we proctor it. And that's just to keep validity to the testing process.
Which, if it's, I guess, cameras are an amazing thing anymore, can we proctor it through, hey, you gotta have video's gotta be on, there's just so many things to it, but, all those things can obviously help our enrollment too, if I understand that correct.
And as far as the numbers go, we hit a high mark last year with COVID. Like Mr. Ross said, if we had known a little bit more at the beginning of the year, remote learning wouldn't have happened because it was so difficult on the student and the teacher end. When we removed the remote option, we told families you can either go this direction back to the high school or this direction to the virtual school. And we did have a small handful that went virtual and others that came to the high school, but a family has to make a decision at that point. Is being at home worth losing out on the social aspect of being around people? And so those who struggle with virtual school, I think sometimes they miss out on that. And so they have to, that's part of the consideration they had to make when they went into it, because if they were wanting to do virtual school for health reasons, and oftentimes there's a sick family member at home, and so we don't want our student going to school, possibly catching something, bringing it home to a sick family member. Well, then that student was 100% virtual, didn't take any classes in the building at all. And when the struggles popped up was because they weren't around their peers, and so it was just them and the computer. So those are among the things that families have to think about when they go into it. Most of our kids, though, that are on the program have at least one class in the building. So we do recommend it for the virtual kids and the DCLE students. And also, just as a quick addendum, when it used to be the Dickinson County Learning Exchange, and then we moved it local, it's only Abilene kids. There's no Dickinson County kids in there. It's just our Abilene kids. And it's not the Dickinson County Learning Exchange anymore. It's just DCLE. We just kept those initials because
We spent a lot of time
had
thinking about a
meaning to
name change, but it meant, people all knew what it was, so we just said, we'll just leave it the way it is.
So if we were to consider a larger virtual program, I think it's a great idea. There's definitely some changes we'd have to make in our approach to it to make it more broad-based.
Would you like to present again?
Over. From the beginning. You have to go out. He was watching.
Go online and watch the video.
Any more questions for Brian?
I'd just like to see it, and I don't know what it would take, but to see what it would take to get a large program going with other districts, and maybe we can be the hub.
I think you guys have to then decide, do you want it to be taught by our staff, or do you want it to be a canned program like we currently use and everything's built into the system?
Yeah.
And then our adults just proctor and facilitate and advise when necessary. Because there are two very different ways about approaching it.
Well, I will say I talked to someone recently and their kiddo is now in their 20s and she just had nothing but good things to say about how you had handled the child and helped them through, and just lots of compliments. So thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks a lot. 5.2, Bullying Prevention Month.
All right. October is Bully Prevention Month, and we take this opportunity to annually point out our policies that we have in our district that are bully prevention policies. I thought I'd start with the Kansas bullying law. Many times we will hear some information from parents that as an administrator, becomes a little bit frustrating in that sometimes, I know I heard it as a principal, and I believe some of our principals have heard things as well. Yeah, this has been going on forever, and nothing's ever been done about it, and yet we've never been aware of it. And I think probably the best thing to inform parents of right away, parents and families, is that when something's going wrong, and whether or not it's specifically bullying or it's a temporary discomfort of some sort, or a kid's just being mean, administrators need to know about it so that they can help teach kids and more responsible young adults eventually. But to actually be bullying, it has to be severe, it has to be persistent, creating intimidation, threatening, abusive environment. There's several factors in our policies are embedded from the Obeas project, and one of the guiding factors that Obeas begins with is there an imbalance of power? And so you can have bullying if you have a group of young people all focusing on negative interaction with a peer. You can have an imbalance of power if you've got somebody size-wise, there can be an imbalance of power. Status-wise, there can be an imbalance of power. But again, then, persistence is probably the key. If it's continuing to go on and on, first of all, as parents, don't let that happen. There's not anybody in this room that's connected, or anybody else that's connected in a professional way to our school district, that believes that's okay to just let bullying behavior continue. And so in the month of October, we have several policies, and they're all included in the packet, in a public forum, even in the packet. Bullying with students, bullying with staff members, bullying from parents. Those are all pieces of the bullying policies that we have in our school district. How's that for a synopsis of a sermon? I worked with a math teacher years ago that said, end of sermon, put the money in the collection plate at the door on your way out. But any questions that you might have on our bully prevention efforts?
Are we seeing any of that anywhere? I mean, I know you have.
Bullying? We see mean kids.
Yeah, it happens. Like Mr. Brown said, the reporting it is the quickest way to get it to our attention. There's a belief that if I report it, it's just going to make it worse. So when a kid says that, then my response is submit an anonymous P3 report. Every name stays out of it. And then that gives us a chance to talk to a kid. Hey, here's what we're hearing. Here's reports that came in. We also work with kids to try to understand these three things. Because if it's just irritating, or if it's annoying, or I don't like it, it doesn't qualify as bullying. And so we try to work the kids through that to make sure it hits all three of those areas.
And that said, that negative behavior is not ignored by the administrators. It's dealt with in terms of teaching.
Okay, well, we don't need to accept these as we already have them as
That's correct.
our policies, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Any more questions? 6.1, Banking RFP.
Okay. We have an agreement with Astra Bank as our primary bank, handles our checking accounts, et cetera. And that agreement, I believe, is a 3-year initial agreement. And so we're up to get that renewed. In the first step in beginning that process is to give Astra Bank a 6-month notice that the process will be rebid, so to speak. And so we will be opening that up here. What's the directions here on this? I believe it was in March. We will be pursuing an RFP, getting that out there to the banks in our community to see if they're interested in becoming the official bank for the school system. Did I miss anything on that?
That went by fast, Randy.
Does seem like.
I guess time flies when you're having fun.
And I think it was actually due last year, but with all things COVID, it was just like, well, we got enough things going on right now. We didn't want to muddy any waters.
Do we need a motion or anything to open an RFP or?
I think at this point, no, it's an informational
Okay,
item for you all. And we'll go.
all right. 7.1, Dana, it's your turn to give a sermon.
It is my turn. Would you be
I
willing
will
to
certainly
show
do
that
that.
learning report? I started on the front slide of the learning report with a bright light bulb and lights shining from that because we really have some positive news to share, and it's exciting to see the results that are taking place. So I started on the very first chart, and at first glance, when you would look at the very first chart that shows our reading assessment information for this fall, you might look at that and say, gosh, those numbers aren't maybe where we would want them to be as you glance at this. But these numbers are showing growth and improvement. And so it is exciting to see that taking place. I did this by buildings, which I had not shared with you last year, but drop that as in buildings so that we could look at larger student groups also and how buildings were moving on. So if we look at the next slide, it breaks down our FastBridge reading assessment by building. This graph absolutely made me smile, putting the information together. And we reviewed our results multiple times last year. And when we saw scores in the fall and then reviewed them again in the winter, scores had dipped a little bit. And those are now showing a rebound because of some real significant efforts that have taken place during that time. Efforts by our teachers, continuing to focus administratively also on teaching and learning, and having some extended learning opportunities, which are all great things. On each of those bars, the dark gray bar is the group of students this year, the grade level they're in, and the light gray bar is showing how that same group performed at the beginning of last year. So third graders this year, and then how they started the year as second graders last year. And you will see that across almost every grade level, we are showing gains with the percentage of students that are at benchmark or above. And that's a reminder that goes with that is that those benchmarks increased over that same timeline as well. So we're expecting more of them now than we did when they were in school at the beginning of last year. And we still have more students meeting that benchmark or above level. We still have some work as we continue to strive towards that 80% of students at benchmark or above, but we have real growth here. We can say.
No, that's fine. Okay.
All right. Next, added the math assessments by building as well. And these, as we look at that larger group, these percentages are increasing as well. And then if you look at the grade level information, again, the dark gray bar shows the percentage of students this year, and the light gray bar shows how they performed last year. I also wanted to make just a reminder that those groups are not exactly the same groups of students. We had from fall of last year, we did have some students that maybe left the district and other students that enrolled. So it's not perfect to compare those groups, but it's as close as we can get at this point to be able to do that. And want to celebrate. I also wanted to point out that when you look at our second grade group this year, it looks like, and it shows on the graph that their percentile of students at benchmark fell from where they performed in the fall of last year. But you have to also keep in mind that when they took the assessment as first graders last year, they were taking an early math assessment, and this year they were taking the A math assessment, which is assessing a wider variety of items and their automaticity with math facts as well. So I think we still need to be really pleased with those results because there's also a shift in the assessment that is measuring their progress.
So again, we still have work to do as we move towards our 80% of students, but we obviously have had a focus on teaching and learning. We have had individuals working hard, both our staff members and students, and that's exciting to see. The last slide includes the Sabres assessment information, and it's marked as building. That should be by grade level, so I apologize by not switching that heading on the graphs as I was copying some slides as I moved along. But this also shows student self-reporting and then how teachers reported the Sabres. The light gray bar shows the student self-assessment. The dark gray shows how teachers rated that. And I just want to give you a comparison. Last year, our student self-ratings ranged percentile-wise from the 58th percentile to the 80th percentile. So if you look at where those gray bars are falling this year, with these several grade levels that you commented on during a learning report, that we had more than a 20 percentile gap between where students were rating themselves and where staff members were.
And if we've got questions, then we can address them then, so.
I want to thank you guys for reading all of those, because your homework load has gotten large this year.
We're getting a lot more of them. Keep going, man. It was long. I had to download it, I think. That was the one